And welcome back to Catholics Coast to Coast. I'm Ace McKay, where we like to really dive deep into conversations that are happening at Podcast Central, EWTN.com/podcast. If you haven't checked it out or haven't been there in a while, there is over 100 different conversations happening to help deepen your walk with faith and also to understand God better. So the best way to do that each week is to jump into God's Word. Let's get our deep dive with your word on the Word.
Do you ever feel like you're just not getting it?
Not getting what?
Like you're missing what's going on?
I'm missing what's going on. Can you fill me in?
That must have been how the disciples felt in this Sunday's gospel.
I am so confused. So what exactly did I miss?
Oh, well, sometimes in Mark's gospel, which we hear this Sunday, the disciples appear to be slow to understand.
Oh, well, I'm glad I'm not the only one.
This week, we hear about John telling Jesus the disciples saw a man casting out demons in Jesus' name.
And they basically said, don't worry, we stopped them.
Jesus corrected John, saying, if demons are being expelled, then God's grace is operative.
For whoever is not against us is for us.
Right. Just because the man isn't one of the 12 doesn't mean he's not a believer. The message then turns into a stern warning against ambition, pride, and jealousy.
And maybe you are guilty on acting on one of those three. If so, this week we challenge you to pray for humility to counteract those vices.
And catch us next time right here on EWTN.
Bye.
Great way to tackle God's Word each and every week. When you want to check out previous episodes or make sure you don't miss what's to come, make sure you go to EWTN.com/podcast and click on Word on the Word, or simply subscribe wherever you like to stream. I'm Ace McKay. As Catholics Coast to Coast continues, we want to get into Just a Guy in the Pew. He's talking about what it means to truly wait on God, and something we all can identify with. So we need some help as we check in with them this week on Catholics Coast to Coast.
Welcome to The Pew, the place where everyday guys talk about everyday things in front of the one person who can do something about it, Jesus Christ. Now here's your host, Just a Guy in the Pew, John Edwards.
Well, hello, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of Just a Guy in the Pew. I am your host, John Edwards, and I'm super excited to be back in the studio, putting down another episode that hopefully you and those around you will enjoy. But folks, this week I'm going to be doing it by myself. Victor and I were both traveling last weekend. He was in Tallahassee for the Memphis Florida State game, which, by the way, my Tigers came out victorious over his Seminoles. Not trying to rub it in, just stating the facts. But I was also traveling myself. I was in Indiana, up there in Muncie, starting a men's group and giving a restored parish mission. So we weren't able to get our schedules together, but the Lord had some things He put on my mind and my heart. So I wanted to go ahead and try to share some of those things with you this week. Folks, before I get started doing that, just want to say thank you to the folks in Muncie, to Jason and Father Eric and everybody else that came out to the mission. You guys gave such a gracious reception, and I'm so excited for the men there as we move forward in launching that group and just seeing what it's going to do for that parish and for that area. So, folks, thanks for welcoming me. I'll be in South Bend, Indiana this coming weekend on the 20th and 21st. I'll be up there at St. Adalbert Parish, giving a restored parish mission and launching a group there. So if you're in town and you're not at the Notre Dame game, come and be with us. In fact, the game's not until the afternoon, so you could spend the morning with us and then drive over to the game. But I'll be up there, and I'm excited to be with Deacon Jose and everybody up there as we launch another ministry of men, and we give a mission there for men and women. Then finally, at the end of the month, the last weekend of the month, the last Saturday of the month, I'll be in Folsom, California, which is shaping up to be a massive mission. They've got a ton of people registered, and we are looking forward to being out there with Tyler and everybody else at St. John the Baptist out there in Folsom, California. So if you're in any of those areas, come and be with us. Stop by, come to the mission. Come and find out how you can be part of the men's group. People are always writing in saying, where are these groups? Where can I go to find one? Where can we go to listen or to see you or to be a part of it, the events you're doing? Well, if you want to know that answer, you can go to Just a Guy in the Pew. You can click our events and book me page. There's a calendar there that lists the next 3 events we're going to be doing, but you can click a button and it will expand and show you every event that we have through 2025 that we have booked so far. So folks, we'd love to see you. We'd love to have you come to the events, and I'd love to meet you in person, especially if you've been listening to the show and been following us for a long time. So check out all that and find out where we're going to be. I also want to invite any and all of you to become monthly partners in the Pew. That simply means people that will give and support to our ministry and the work that we're doing here each and every month. that's useful, because we need to know what kind of funds we have to be able to grow and to support this ministry. We've got people we need to bring on because we are getting booked up more than we've ever been. It's crazy. The Lord is telling me in my prayer that I have to bring on other people because I simply can't handle it all myself anymore. I just can't. There's too many engagements and too many things. So we need to bring on some people. We have some great people in mind, but to be able to do that, we have to have the funding and the resources to do that. So I would ask that any of you that have enjoyed listening to the show, that have been touched by anything that we've done, that have gone to any of the retreats or the Restored Parish Missions or men's conferences, that are part of any of the groups we've launched, that you consider paying it forward, paying it to the next guy, so that we can go and build these places in other parishes, and we can continue to help people through this podcast and through all the things that we're doing in the ministry. So if you want to become a monthly partner in the Pew, you can do so by going to justaguyinthepew.com. There's a donate button on the side of the screen that's on every screen as you scroll. It's also in the top menu items there. It says support or donate. You can become a monthly partner in the Pew in a matter of minutes through our donor box donation platform. And folks, I could tell you, it would humble me, and I would be so grateful if you would, because gosh, the Lord is doing great things in this ministry each and every week. I hear stories. I get emails from people just about how their lives are changing and how men are becoming the men they're called to be for their families, and that's what we need now more than ever. So, folks, go there, check out all that we're doing. You can also see the pilgrimages we have going on our website. Everything is there. So go to justaguyinthepew.com to give, to support, to find out our events, and to just join us on pilgrimages or anything else. So, folks, thanks for listening to that as we jump into the show. So, folks, this week, it's so funny. I always look to God to say, what do you want me to talk about this week? Because we've got almost 300 episodes now, right? That's a lot of stuff to have talked about. And sometimes I can feel the pressure of like, well, what are you going to talk about next? And I don't try to just go searching for something. I oftentimes just try to look at my own life and see where God is moving in it, or the things that I'm experiencing myself, and realizing that, we're all human beings. We're all we all go through the same things. We all deal with similar things. And so I try to look there in my own experiences to try to share what's going on. And this week is no different. And if you were listening to the show last week, you know that Victor and I put out a show on persevering in desolation. And we talked about what it was like in those moments where it feels like God is abandoned you or left you, or you can't feel God. And the truth of it, as we said, is God never really abandons you. There's a lot of times in our life where we're looking for God, or we're looking for answers, and it could seem like, we're waiting on God. And that's the thing I want to talk about this week, is waiting on God. I mean, it is, desolation, consolation, all those things. We could feel like we're waiting on answers. And a lot of times in our life, we have decisions or places we've come to where we need to lean on God, and we're trying to, when we go to Him in prayer, and we're trying to listen or feel Him. And this past weekend, in Muncie even, I was talking about this in one of my talks. I was talking about spiritual warfare and the different voices, that we can hear in our head and in our lives. And, I always talk about how the devil is the loud one, and he's usually, sitting there accusing us or trying to convince us that we're never no better than our worst sins, and how loud he is, and how he can say things like, you can't, you won't, you never, you shouldn't, you don't deserve, you're not worthy, all those things he says. But I talked about hearing our own voice, like distinguishing between his and our voice, and then especially listening for God's voice. And after I was through with that talk, we were on a short break and waiting for the third talk of the mission, the one on relationship with Christ. One of the guys came up to me and he said, hey, you were talking about the voices, and man, I could totally feel what you're saying about the devil. I experienced that in my life, and just those negative voices that we hear, that negative voice, it's of the evil one. He said, but you mentioned like listening for God, and that God's in the whisper. And I was talking about in the Old Testament how Elijah didn't hear God in the storm or the fire and the earthquake or whatever. He heard him in the whisper, in the silence, in that still quiet voice. And that's the way I've heard God so often in my life. God doesn't show up with a bullhorn most of the time and go, hey, you, look at me and listen. Although we probably all would wish that, because it'd be much easier to find his voice and make decisions and get that confirmation that we're making the right choices and moving in the right direction. But oftentimes it's not that way. I mean, it never really has been in my life. It's been this small whisper, and a lot of times the times where I've heard God has been where either one of my own volition and my own choice, slowing down and stopping and trying to be more present to him, or in the case of going to jail, where he actually sat me down in a place where I had to slow down. And And that's the thing, like, not only do we need to persevere, as we talked about last week in desolation, just persevere in seeking God, but there's another aspect to it. We need to be patient in our waiting on God, right? I mean, that's the thing we have to wait for. And that's what I told that man. I said, look, here's the thing. It's hard to hear that whisper because we're never willing to slow down. Right? We live in a world that tells us to go, go, go more than ever, right? And we feel like we have to be doing something all the time to be productive, right? To show something for our work. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I always feel like in my life, I have to go, 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 go. Like if I sit down and I stop what I'm doing even for a second to enjoy something or just to be still, I feel guilty. Like there's something I should always be doing. Right? If I'm at home, there should be some laundry, or I should be cooking dinner, or I should be doing yard work, or I should be, tidying up around the house, or doing something. Like I really feel guilty a lot for sitting there and not doing anything on purpose, like being idle. And I know that we hear idle hands are the work of the devil, and that's what I'm talking about. Like people saying, look, you need to be doing something. You need to be doing something. But God didn't make us human doers. He made us human beings. And this is something we've talked about before on the show. And while, yes, there is merit to making sure the time you spent is of value and you're getting things done that you need to get done, right? That we're not being lazy or slothful. There's a point to that. But there's a difference, too, in between being lazy and slothful and actually taking time that we have purposely set aside for being with God to wait on Him. And, right? And part of the reason we don't want to slow down is because we actually have to start thinking about things in our life that maybe we don't want to. Like it's in those slow moments that things start to bubble up that need our attention. And oftentimes we don't want to give our attention to those things, so we busy ourselves to take our mind off of it, right? When there's bad things going on in our life, or when there's a decision that we're waiting to come down for somewhere, like we don't want to sit and ponder and just fixate on that, so we want to busy ourselves. And that's a good thing for some, but for others, we can get so busy that we never sit to listen to God. And that's the thing, He is found in that whisper. He's found in that stillness. That's also why the devil, the world, and the flesh around us try to put everything around us to keep us from being with God, right? Everything to distract us, like these stupid things here, these phones that ding, and you got emails 1 second and notifications from all your apps and social media, alerts and all that stuff, and the news cycle alerts and all that stuff is meant to distract you. And so often it comes for me right in the middle of when I'm about to sit down with God, and it's like, ding, don't forget this. And it might as well be Satan going, ding, don't sit down with God. I don't want you to, so look over here. It really is like squirrel, for a dog, where a dog is just intent on something, and then boom, there goes a squirrel, and you're off in the grass somewhere, and that the deep hedges, off to yourself and lost. And that's what the devil is trying to do, because he knows when we slow down and we take time for God in our lives, we're actually going to have a chance of hearing Him. We're actually going to have a chance to connect with Him. And He doesn't want that. And that's why waiting for God is so hard, because we get impatient. Again, we feel like we need to be doing something. We feel like we're failing at life if we sit down and we aren't just going every second. I don't know about you, but even at night when I try to go to sleep, it's like I fight with my mind to slow down and to stop and to give me peace and to give me rest. It's because most of the time during the day, I'm not taking opportunities to stop, even if it's just for a couple of minutes, to acknowledge God and acknowledge that I need a break from the going, right? From the hamster wheel, from the never-ending highway of life, right? It just the busyness that is brought before us all the time. And so when this man said this to me, I was like, look, you have to be intentional. I was like, you have to find time to pray. And he said, well, I do, and I go to adoration and things like that. And the thing is, it made me think about that, and even my own experience in adoration. Like, yes, I will take time to go to adoration and be with God, but how often do I have like a stack of books, like from my hands of where you can barely see my face, of all these things in case I need some sort of inspiration, or in case I need to read something, or I've got my rosaries or all these different devotional things to bring with me in case I need something. But folks, honestly, if I'm being truthful with you about how it is for myself sometimes, I do it because I'm afraid to sit in silence, right? I need to be doing something even in that. Like, what am I going to do if I just go sit and I look at the Eucharist and the monstrance, right? And I just focus on that. And you can feel that tension, like, oh, I better take something in case I get bored, or in case I run out of something to say, or in case I need something to commune with God. And look, I know that we need places to start our conversation with God. That's good to take a Magnificat or something in there and maybe look at the daily reading and ask God then to put it down then and say, Lord, all right, where do you want to take me through this? What sticks out? There are good things like that. But folks, a lot of times we're being honest, We take those things in there for distractions as well because we're afraid of simply being still. And we get worried about, well, what if I fall asleep, or what if I this? Well, you know what? At least you fell asleep in the arms of God, right? Like we set all this stuff before us because we don't like waiting on God. We're impatient, right? We don't like sitting in that awkwardness, right? We don't like feeling like we don't have anything to say. And that's why so many of our prayers are practiced and we say the same thing over and over again because we can feel like we did something then. But the point of being with God is not feeling like you've done something. The point is being with him, like literally taking that time out to listen, to share, of course, what you need, not like God doesn't know what you need, but to help you voice that to him, to get it out, and then to listen, right? And then to flip the switch and close the mouth and open the ears. But again, we don't want to do that because we feel like we have to be running the conversation. We feel like we have to be saying something. If we run to the end of our words, then that must mean we're at the end of our time with God. And that's not the truth. Like everything in this world pushes us to be doing stuff, to try to be as efficient in our lives as we can be by trying to do 24 billion things at the same time. And the same thing with our phones. You can have 8 billion apps doing 8 different things. Our schedules are just full of constant running and things over things and meetings after meetings and all this other stuff. We feel like we got to keep up with the Joneses to be just as busy as somebody else, but the Lord is inviting all of us to slow down, to be willing to sit in that awkward silence and to listen and to wait for him. Like that's where we hear him. And we see it with Jesus, right? Jesus would even go, he would steal away to pray, right? It says he went off on a mountain to pray. He went away in a place to be by himself because he needed to hear the voice of God. He needed to hear his Father because that's where he got his marching orders. That's where he started to figure out everything in his life. So not only is it about persevering in these times where we feel we don't feel God or where we're not getting answers that we want, part of that perseverance is having patience. It's waiting on God. And it's in the waiting, which often feels uncomfortable and we get frustrated and we get angry. It's like, I've been doing that and God's not telling me anything. Well, we have this tendency to look at these as things where we're not getting our way or we're not getting an answer we want to as some sort of punishment. But actually what it is a gift from God. There's grace in the waiting. Like that's what I'm coming to find out in my own life, that there's grace in the waiting, right? And just those moments because God is bestowing grace upon you so that you can build virtue. Right? I mean, yes, God could snap his fingers at any time and do whatever he wanted and give you whatever he wanted to, but what kind of people would that make us be? Probably more demanding and wanting to slow down and listen to him less and just demanding and hoping that we can treat God like a vending machine, right? Just, okay, now I want this, now I want that. You know, it needs to fly out of the chute and be in my hand instantly. But if that's what we're doing, we're treating God like a genie instead of our Lord and our Father, right? It's not about rubbing a lamp and getting what you want. It's about sitting there and through these things that the Lord knows that you need. Jesus has told us that. He knows the hairs on your head, right? He gives everything to the birds of the air. How much more important are we? Jesus tells us these things. But he also invites us and shows us through his own acts to go and to sit in the silence and to be patient. That is the hard part. And through those things, we find the virtue. Right? Look at Jesus in the garden. He went in his times of suffering and his times of needs, and he was sitting there sweating blood, and he was fearful. But he went and he spoke to God, and he listened to him. And what did he find? He found the fortitude he needed to move forward in the plan that God had for his life, his earthly life there. He moved forward with that in the strength that he found in God because he was patient enough to wait. Right? And he spent so much of his time being patient. And that's what we have to do. Right? I mean, waiting is something that is going to be a part of every aspect of our life. Right? And we have to get away from this notion and this push by the culture in the world that we got to have something right now. And if we don't, then we need to be upset. We need to lose our peace. No, we need to learn to understand maturity. We need to learn to understand to be patient and to be grateful in the situations that we are. Even in our worst moments, we're still 6 feet above the ground. We're still breathing. We still have an opportunity for blessings in our lives and to be a blessing to other people. The grace is in the waiting. Now, what do I mean by that? In the waiting, like I said, we find virtue. The first of which is patience, right? We learn that like, hey, slow down, slow your roll, ease up, take a breath, and just look at the graces that are around you already. Have a conversation with God you need to have, but slow down and be patient, right? St. Thomas of Aquinas talks about this. He says, "Grant me, O Lord my God, a mind to know you, a heart to seek you, wisdom to find you, conduct pleasing to you, faithful perseverance in waiting for you, and a hope of finally embracing you." We hear it from St. Basil the Great too. He says, "And so let us be glad and bear with patience everything the world throws at us, secure in the knowledge that it is then that we are most in the mind of God." Folks, this is the grace of the waiting, right? And we hear it in the scriptures too. In Psalm 130, verse 5, it says, "I wait for the Lord. My whole being waits, and in his word I put my hope." It goes on, Isaiah goes on to say in Isaiah 40:31, he says, "But they who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint." Micah, even in chapter 7 and verse 7, he says, "But as for me, I will look to the Lord. I will wait for the God of my salvation. My God will hear me." This is what's so great about patience, right? Is sitting there and what an opportunity to sit with the Lord and just to imagine yourself at the Lord's feet. And whether he's giving you an answer or not, what a grace it is to just be in his presence and to be received by him. And that's what all of these things are saying. St. Thomas Aquinas is like saying to be faithful in his perseverance and waiting for you. How do you do that? With patience. And what is the benefit of patience? Fortitude, right? When we actually sit down and we make ourselves be patient and we kind of quell the voice of that spoiled little kid that the world tries to build in us, that we want what we want right now, and give me God, and why aren't you answering me? And if you don't, then I'm going to go have a pity party because I didn't get the answer right now. I'm speaking about this, folks, because I know that's where I've been in my life all the time. What gives, God? I'm doing what you're asking me to do. I'm trying to live this life. Why won't you give me answers right now? Why won't you tell me what I need to know? Because God knows better than you, and he has better timing than you. And what he asks of you is not demanding from him. Because think about how ridiculous that is and how insolent that is to demand things from God. But he waits for us to be patient and to trust in him and to know and to believe that he really has our good in mind. And while it may not be on our time, it's on his time. And guess what? His timing has saved me from a lot of things I thought I wanted that when I turned out seeing what he was doing, I was glad I didn't get. Right? But it helps you with fortitude because you're able to start growing in patience and growing in these virtues, which lead to other virtues. Fortitude, like I'm going to sit here and I'm going to grow my will. I'm going to grow my strength, right? That I don't have to be some flippant child that needs something right then and there and demands it. No, I could sit here in my love of the Lord and find this fortitude. And those moments of going, you know what, the devil's coming at me and he's in my ear, and see, God's not good. God doesn't love you. God's not giving you what you want. If he was a loving father, he would. I could sit there and go, you know what, get behind me, Satan. As we heard Peter say in this past Sunday's readings, or as Jesus say to Peter, get behind me, Satan, right? That's what he says to Peter. When he's hearing a voice that is contrary to the will of his father and contrary to the plans of God, he says that to Peter, get behind me, Satan. We should say the same thing in those moments of, but you deserve this, you need this, you've worked hard. Like, why isn't God giving you an answer? Why is he showing you 100 steps right now instead of the one little dim light he's showing in front of you? Get behind me, Satan. We need to be stronger than that, right? To build our fortitude so that we can withstand these attacks and withstand these temptations and these self-absorbed thoughts that lead us away from God and not to him, that make us be some demanding servant instead of a quiet and listening and loving and trusting servant. Right? It's that perseverance and that patience that teaches us obedience in all things. But also in that patience and that perseverance and that obedience, we find hope. Because how often, no matter how long you've been waiting, sometimes you're waiting so long you forget you were even waiting. But then God reveals this some gift to you, or some grace that he's bestowed on you, and you're like, oh, that's what I was waiting for. That's what you were doing. That's what I didn't see. And folks, I got to tell you, I've seen that so many times in my life. When I was working for that small ministry, Cardinal Studios, when I first got out of my job at Napa Auto Parts, like I worked for them and it seemed to be going good. And then all of a sudden things happened where it wasn't feasible any longer for them to employ me. They had to go in a different direction, for where God was calling them. And that was right at Christmas Eve one year. Like, I was literally about to go to Mississippi and be with my dad. And in a moment's notice, like, I found out that I wasn't going to be with him the next year. I thought I was calling to have a call to find out about plans for next year. And the plan was God had a different plan for my life. And so I started this very nonprofit that we're in now and doing the work that we're doing. But in the beginning of that, like, I took money I didn't have. I started this nonprofit and I was like, okay, God, where are you? What do I do? What do I do in a nonprofit? How am I going to survive? How am I going to feed my family? What do you want me to do? And weeks went by and I felt myself getting full of despair and darkness and hurting and getting angry with God and saying, God, where are my answers? I've done what you wanted me to do. Like, so many people in this world don't care about you and I've given up everything. I've taken massive pay cuts and I'm sitting here on the floor in my bedroom each and every week watching my wife go to work and support my family while I'm sitting here playing ministry. And I was so angry. I was so angry to the point where I threw a Bible across the room on my bed and said, you know what, God, I give up. I give up. Like, you either got to show me something or I quit, which I don't recommend you demand things of God. But it was a week later, I had one event that got canceled. I was even more in a depression of that because at least I would have been able to hand some finances to my family at the time. But all of a sudden, I got a call from a friend of mine who wanted to start an online conference company. And we didn't even say that. We're just like, we want to do an online conference because the Eucharist, we were unable to get to the Eucharist because of COVID. Everything was shut down. And all of a sudden we did that. And the Lord blessed it and it turned into a ministry and a company that supported my family and helped give me time to build out Just a Guy on the Pew and what it was going to be. And we were able to help so many people through the process of all of that. So God wasn't working on my timing, he was working on his. And so here's the thing. All that aside, now I can go back anytime that I'm like, God, where are you? Well, God, what if I take this step and why won't you just tell me this is what I need? And why don't you make it clear? And why don't you make it obvious? I can look back on the times where I trusted and I waited for God and see that he has never let me down, that he's never left me desolate and alone. Even in the times it felt like that, he showed up with a better plan, with a better option. He showed up to lift me out of that darkness and to show me what he had in store for me the entire time. But folks, it took patience. I learned in all those times where I was being short-sighted, when I was demanding things of God, that he had his own timing. And no matter how much I wanted it to be right now, and I wanted a plane to fly by with a banner with exactly what he wanted me to do, that didn't happen. But because of those hard times I was able to go through, because of those times of desolation, because of those times of wondering and waiting, I found out that he had a better plan, and I grew in virtue. I learned to be patient with God, trusting in the places where he'd already shown me that he was who he says he was, and he was good to his word. Folks, this is why it's so important to wait on God. This is why it's so important to slow down and to listen to him, to fight the noise of the world and the anxieties you have when you sit for a moment. That's where you exercise patience. When all those annoying things and those things that are on your mind and the grocery list and the chores and the errands you have to run when you're in adoration, that's when you sit there and you go, get away from me. Get behind me, Satan. I'm going to be here. I'm going to spend this time and I'm going to sit patiently, quietly waiting on the Lord. Because I know that eventually he's going to show up. I know that eventually he's going to make it obvious what he wants in my life. I know that he's going to show me the next step that I need to take in my life. That's where we grow to hear the voice of God. That's where we grow in patience that leads to fortitude. And that fortitude leads to that hope. That's what I'm talking about. When God has shown up and you have time and time and again seen that in your life because you were patient enough to wait on him, then you start to grow in that virtue of hope. That virtue is so necessary in our faith. That virtue that keeps us away from falling to temptation and turning away from God is that hope that's found through patience and fortitude. But none of those things are found without waiting for God. It's in the waiting that we see a gift. We see the waiting now, a lot of us in our lives, as a pain, as a nuisance, as a punishment. But it's not. It's another invitation from God. It's another gift from a God to enter into that quiet relationship where you can learn his voice, where you can learn his mannerisms, where you could see his movements, and you can learn more about yourself and grow in virtue as well. Folks, that's what we need now more than anything. And there's saints that say that. There's saints that say, let us be patient and bear with patience everything the world throws at us, secure in the knowledge that it is then that we are most in the mind of God. St. Basil. Fulton Sheen says, patience is power. Patience is not an absence of action as many of us think it is. Rather, it is timing. It waits in patience.
Well, sometimes God calls us to slow down and listen, and it's His grace that helps to be the life-changing moment for us all. So check that out. If you want more on the conversations from Just a Guy in the Pew, easy to find at Podcast Central when you go to EWTN.com/podcast, or just find Just a Guy in the Pew wherever you like to stream. I'm Ace McKay. When Catholics Coast to Coast returns, we're going to check in with Forte Catholic, who's answering some bold questions this week about have the bullied become the bullies, and are Catholic schools good to have youth groups? We'll find out more when Forte Catholic gives the conversation with this week's Catholics Coast to Coast.
If it's central to the faith, you can find it on EWTN Podcast Central, featuring the best of EWTN radio, as well as faith-filled podcasts from our friends and affiliates across the nation, all in one place, all free. The destination for great Catholic audio programming is EWTN Podcast Central. It's like podcast heaven. Visit EWTN.com/radio/podcasts today.
Hello there, I'm Taylor Stroll, and that is Christopher Leandro Bartlett. Hello, Chris.
Hello, friend. How are you, Taylor?
I am doing very well. So you have gained some new and greater importance, which got you invited back onto the show. That's the only reason that you are here. But we're not going to talk about that yet. That's a tease for later in the show.
Just listeners, just salute me now. That's all I got to say.
Exactly. He's very fancy now, even though he has a title that he doesn't deserve, which means you finally fit on this show, because I, too, have a title that I don't deserve.
Child of God by grace and mercy alone?
I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. You know that one?
Yeah, I just, worship isn't worship unless it's really breathy. So I love that version of it.
I need to growl. I need to make, the Lord is a Lion of Judah, and I'm trying to be just like him. I'm trying to roar my praises.
Yes, preach.
So,
Preach.
I started this conversation with Father Anthony on last week's episode, and then we didn't get to it because we started talking about other things, and then we hit the hour mark. I'm like, well, and then we just didn't fix it. We just kind of left it hanging there. So we're going to start with it today. And actually, you are the perfect person to talk about this subject with for two reasons. Because it involves Rocket League, which is something that you and I have in common, and also bullying. We were both bullied as children, and you've shared that before. You were bullied by the boys. I was bullied by the girls because they knew that I was a nice enough person that I wasn't going to hit them. I was bigger than all the boys, so they didn't mess with me. So you and I had a similar but also very different childhood.
I was bullied by people that looked like you. Yes.
Yeah, and here's the overall scope. I'm going to tell a story about my son and how I think he is turning out exactly like me, for better or for worse. I was watching him play Rocket League the other day, and he did something, and I'm like, that's exactly what I would have done. Uh-oh.
Nice. Okay, I'm excited.
Because I think what has happened, the premise of this is, I think because I was bullied, I learned pretty quickly how to be sad. That was the first thing that happened. I was sad because all the girls were mean to me in junior high. And then in ninth grade, I got a 6-pack, and all of a sudden they were all very nice to me. I don't understand what happened, but you also were bullied. But I think what happened to me is that after I got sad, I got very quick-witted in order to fight back against the bullies, right? But I think I learned these skills of protection to protect myself. And then I got large and a little bit more popular, but I kept the quick wit. And I think I might have turned into the bully. I think I might be a bully currently. So what were your mechanisms to fight against the bullying, or did you just continue to lose?
Yeah, no. So if it got physical, I would lose. But I was fast, so I could outrun a few people. I remember one day at middle school, they had this period that was like lunch, but then you scarfed down your lunch in 12 seconds and you went, there was a field and then a lower field that went down to the track. And I had these 4 guys that were chasing me, and occasionally they would chase me and they would give me Indian burns or whatever you're supposed to call it now, where they would hurt you, cause you pain or whatever.
Native American heat.
Yes. But 4 against 1, flaming tacos on the arm, whatever. But 4 against 1.
I think you made it worse.
I regret and withdraw my last comment, dear America. They were chasing after me, and I was fast, so I would run. And I think that was part of the fun, is that I was hard to catch and I would make chase. But they were gaining on me, and I ran down the hill. And then I just stopped. I slid on my tush, and then I turned around and I started running back up the hill. Well, the momentum of them chasing me carried them straight down the hill, and they ran past me as I was running back up the hill. And it's one of my favorite bowling memories. I have a lot of not favorite bowling memories.
I was about to say, this sounds like the one time you got away.
This is the one time I got away. So while that wasn't normally my experience, that's the experience I care to share on your show today.
Well, very good. Very good. So I'm going to get one bad one out of you. I promise you that I will. So we've played Rocket League before, and essentially in Rocket League, you can type whatever you want, but for the most part, me, you, my son, we're playing on console, which means we don't have a keyboard at the ready. Like you'd have to type like our parents type. Like you have to like scroll
T9.
the click, scroll the clicker over to one letter and then scroll all the way down, and then you're in the middle of the game. So like for the most part, we're not typing. So we're using this thing called Quick Chat, where essentially there are 4 times 4. So that's 16 options that are pre-programmed. You can kind of tailor them to whatever you want. I know you've picked some of your favorites that you use. But one of the most basic ones is like, there's like one that says like, nice shot. Rocket League is car soccer. If you know what soccer is, it's soccer, but you drive a car instead of playing as a person. Don't think of it too hard. It's just soccer, right? So you can say, nice shot, great pass, I'm open, take the shot. But the most common one used in a derogatory way, and it's just understood by the community, is
to be the big fat middle finger. What a save.
What a save. Exactly. So what Rocket League intended it for it to be is when you get a save, you actually get as many points as you do when you score a goal. Like it's a big deal to get a save, right? You get these 50 points. If you get an epic save, it's like 70 or 80. Like you get a lot of points. So that's what the Quick Chat was made for, was what a save.
An affirmation.
Absolutely. But how is it used, Christopher?
Sarcastically, whenever you score on someone, you type in what a save, what a save, what a save 3 times. Because if you go 4, they pause you and they say, Quick Chat has been paused for the next 3 seconds. So you type it in 3 times, and it's your big way of saying, neener, 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 I scored a goal on you.
And I like how we're already differentiating ourselves because, you're the one standing up against the bullies. You'll say, what a save, what a save, what a save. And then you said you stop after the 3 seconds. I am pushing it the entire 3 seconds until it lets me say it again. And I end up saying it as many times as possible until the ball is snapped. And if it's not a close game, and like, let's say Chris is on my team, I'm saying it to the other team the whole time. I'm just sitting back there letting Chris play. And I'm just like, sitting in the goal in case they get close. Chris is pretty good. He's handling his own business. I'll say what a save 80 times in the next like 3.5 minutes. And then when the game ends, I'm saying what a save over and over again. It's like you can't cuss in the game. Like it bleeps it out. It puts like asterisks in if you cuss. Even if you say something that's not cussing, but it like has a cuss word in it. Like if you were like, oh, you took me to class instead of school, it would take out the word class. So it just say you took me to asterisk.
Star.
That looks way worse than class ever did, But like,
Yep.
But okay, so I think people kind of get what's happening here, right? The other way that you can do it, you mentioned when you score on somebody else, but I would also do it to my teammates, like yourself. Me and you are playing 2-on-2 against 2 people that we don't know. And so you miss a save that you absolutely should have had. And what am I saying 3 times in a row? What a save, what a save, what a save. Because I'm like, Chris, you suck. You absolutely should have gotten it. Like, if somebody makes a great shot, I'm not going to say it, right? But if you accidentally drive forward instead of backwards and you miss a ball going 2 miles an hour, you're getting 3 what a saves from me and maybe not.
And this is where we enter the gray area of bullying. Right? Because like it's my friend Taylor ribbing me a little bit, kind of elbowing me. Hey, dude, come on, you should have had that. And I'm like, yeah, I totally should have. I'm a doofus. And guys talk to each other like that. But like, that's different than when some stranger scores a goal and all of a sudden is like, this is the appropriate time to go ahead and lift the digital middle finger towards me by saying, what a save 13 times in a row. Like that. Like, just get back to the game. But when you do it to me, I'm like, yes, I know, Taylor. Oh my gosh. And our buddy Doug, who skill level is a growth area.
As good
let's
as
say.
Anyone listening who's never heard of the game.
Pretty almost. Yeah.
Oh,
So
he's almost as good as you.
Almost as good. Yeah. But he can roll with it, and he has such a way to just let it just roll off of him to where he's like, yeah, I know. Oh my gosh, I'm the worst, blah, blah, blah. And he's so much fun to play with because he can take the jabs. Sorry. He's got such a good sense of humor when you're playing with him because of that reality. And so even then, our friendship is almost strengthened by kind of poking the bear, so to speak, but not when it's the stranger on the other team. That enrages me.
Right. But even taking it a little further, right? Like if you and I, like, because we also have these headsets on, so like I don't need to be using the quick chat. I'm using it mostly to be funny, right? Like when it's me and you, I'm mostly being funny, and like typically with the other team, I'm being funny unless they were mean to me first. If they were mean to me first, that's when I'm saying what a save 80 times when we're winning, because it's like you started it, I'm finishing it. Like that's that's essentially how this is going, right? But even amongst friends, like I have had arguments with friends in Rocket League. Let's say we've been playing together for an hour, and you miss one save that's an easy one. It's like we both laugh at it because like we both know that you're better than that. We both know that you made a stupid, you clicked the wrong thing, whatever, right? But if you have 6 or 7 like that, I might actually start being like, dude, what the hell? Like I want to win, and then you're getting upset at me because I'm getting upset at you. Like these things have happened before, right? So it's like I can do the one action, and we both agreed that it was funny, and it's this light ribbing, 5 minutes in. But if I'm doing the same thing an hour in, and we've been dealing with it for an hour, that's when it starts to become like, okay, you talked about the gray area. Like I might actually be bullying now, and I have to deal with this quite a bit, right? Where it's like I'm ribbing, I was fine with it, you were fine with it, but an hour and a half in, maybe not.
Right.
So I'm watching Chris. My 11-year-old playing Rocket League, and I'm sitting like I think I'm eating lunch on our sofa. He's playing on this other screen right here. So like I'm watching a show, and then my show ended. So I just glanced down real quick to see how he was doing in Rocket League, right?
Sure.
And sure enough, what a save! What a save! What a save!
He's saying that
my son is doing it to the guy that he just scored on. And I look down, and it's like, I can't do anything but laugh hysterically. I start laughing. He realizes that I'm no longer watching my comedy TV show because it's paused. He realizes pretty quickly that I'm laughing at him, and he turns around and he smiles. He's like, what? I'm like, I can't get mad at you because like he absolutely learned that from watching me play.
Yes. Yeah. You're a horrible father.
Oh, yeah, thank you. That's what I was waiting for.
I'm like, how do I say this tenderly? And I'm like, no, I'm not going to say it tenderly. No, there's a danger, man. Like, it's funny, but then you're like, oh, I can't. Because sometimes, like, my youngest son, was getting picked on by his little sister. And finally, he just pushed her away. And I was like, you know what? Because I saw how it went down, she deserved some sort of a reaction. She was going for a reaction. She got a reaction. She's crying, and she comes and is like, oh, he pushed me, blah, blah, blah. I saw it. She wasn't hurt. And I didn't get my son in trouble. I was like, yeah, you were kind of asking for it. You know what I mean? I know that sounds weird to say, but like there is an element to where, and I don't know if that was bullying or just siblings or whatever. There is a certain element of reaction that is appropriate at times. Like you said, when they started texting the what a save to you, you're like, okay, now we're going to destroy you guys, and we're going to stick your nose in it all along the way. But unprovoked, it does feel kind of like a jerk move when I'm on the receiving end of it, which is why we haven't played Rocket League in a while.
Right. Yeah, that's the reason. So,
that's the sole reason.
The sole reason. So it was funny. I asked him about it after the game was over. He was like, that guy said it first, and I hit the game-winning goal on him. So I'm going to say it. I'm like, okay.
Okay.
Like,
so
fine.
it was the lane.
The
lane that
like,
we agree with.
So it was really funny just to kind of see him and to kind of talk through it with him and to laugh. It was just so funny because it's like I saw him doing what I did, but like I think mine does go back to like I do that kind of stuff because the bullying bothers me because I was bullied when I was a kid, right?
Sure.
But I am I'm using that as an excuse, even though I'm 20 years removed from it, right? Maybe even more, right? So it's like some of that, like it's this weird thing, like, childhood trauma, whatever your childhood trauma is. Everybody talks about it, where it's like, okay, we can't completely dismiss our childhood trauma, but we can't not do anything about it either, or not change. Like I can't blame every time that I've bullied somebody on, the girls in 6th and 7th and 8th grade. Like it's not their fault. At some point it's mine, right? But there's this balance, and it's kind of hard to actually like know in myself where to find that balance, and it's especially difficult to talk about it, which is why we're having this private conversation about it. So
yes.
It's just this weird thing of like I see people all the time doing the like, oh, but I had this happen to me as a kid, or I whatever, and it's just like. I'm 34. Like at some point I have to take ownership for my own actions. And yet I still know where this came from, where these quote unquote muscles of, quick wittedness and standing up for myself were honed. And that was during that season. So I don't know. I've just been kind of thinking about it.
Well, and if you look at the other side of the coin, which is me, because I got bullied a lot, and I hope that I haven't turned into a bully at times because of it, but there is a certain element of how far outside the lines can you draw before someone's like, dude, you're not even coloring anymore, and correct it. I was coaching a soccer team, and it's a kids soccer team, like U8, U7, whatever. It's just kids. Every player shows up wearing shin guards and cleats, and one kid shows up wearing boots, like thick boots. And I'm like, okay, this will correct itself, because the other kids on the soccer team will be like, hey, why are you wearing boots? You're not supposed to wear boots. Or worse, hey, dork in the boots. You know what I mean? I don't know. The kids don't say dork, whatever they say, but they didn't say anything. You know what corrected it is blisters. Blisters corrected the issue. But nevertheless, there is a certain aspect of I was quick-witted and I ran my mouth quite a bit. And my station in the hierarchical popularity was pretty low, to where I probably shouldn't have been running my mouth because of the way the pecking order worked. But I ran my mouth, and every now and then it led to a consequence that could definitely be defined as bullying. I'm not saying that I deserved all of it, but there's some times where I ran my mouth and the appropriate reaction was to respond with force, so.
All right. It's Christopher Bartlett story time. Here we go.
Oh, well, no, that's not. No.
Yep. Example time.
There have been times there. Okay. So there was this, there's this one time that we got bullied. This is actually kind of funny. My brother and I.
Okay.
We had kind of the poor kid bikes. All the other kids are having Huffies and things like that. We have these road bikes that my parents got off of like a garage sale for like $8 a piece. They literally have different things that have whatever. It's just a road bike. And I ended up going to get my bike. I stayed after school at middle school for a little bit, and all of my pieces were taken off. So I'm like, dang it. And I had to put all the pieces back on. And then as I'm walking my bike out, I see a pile of screws on the ground, and I'm like, huh. So I pick up that pile of screws and I throw it over the fence to the junkyard that's behind us. And I'm like, haha, to whoever that is. And I get home, and there my brother is after walking his bike home, because all the screws got taken from his bike and he didn't find them. And so I was like, being the tough guy, whatever. I accidentally bullied my brother by destroying his bike permanently by throwing his screws over the front yard. But have you ever heard the phrase, to go a little bit more deep, hurt people hurt people?
I have, but before we move on, that story ended way differently than I thought it was going to. I thought it was going to be you having this big moment. I thought you were going to pay the price, not your brother. That would have been hilarious. I thought you threw the screws over and then realized pretty quickly 3 feet later when you got on your bike that they were to your bike, and like all the wheels went everywhere and the handlebars went everywhere. That's how I thought it was going to happen, and it made me happy, which I think proves my point that I have become the bully.
Yeah. But Yeah, the hurt people one. There was someone was mouthing off as I was walking home from that same middle school. Someone was mouthing off to me, and so I shouted back something back to him, and he was with his group of friends. Now, him and I were on soccer teams as kids, so it wasn't a big deal for us to rib each other a little bit, but because he was in front of his other friends, he had to do a display of strength, and he came and clocked me one good. And it knocked one of my teeth loose. I was able to push it back in place and hold it there and whatever. So it worked out. We didn't have to go to the dentist or anything like that. But
is that how teeth work?
Huh?
Is that how teeth work?
It loose, not out. Knocked it loose. It was wiggly. What? I was 12. I'm not a dentist.
Screws from the junkyard to put it back in.
I should have just used them screws, and I would have had myself a free can opener. But then, so my dad calls his dad and says, we need to sit down and talk about this. It's not acceptable to clock for these boys to be clocking each other like that or whatever. And so like 4 days later, we go to his house and we get there and the boy is nowhere to be found. And the dad is cleaning blood off his knuckles. And it was the most awkward 7-minute conversation. I assure you, my son won't do that again. You can hear him whimpering in the background, like in the whatever room. And then we got in the car and my dad looked at me and said, son, that boy did not hit you. His father did. And that sometimes is what happens. And we drove home. And it was a perspective that the kid wasn't a jerk. His situation was a jerk, and some perspective. So I know this is a more uplifting Catholic comedy show, so I'll pass it back to you to recover from that story. Got way too heavy, way too quick, but there's your heavy story.
Now I'm mad at that kid because he had a reason. Like, what's my reason? I think I'm still stuck as a bully and my dad's not currently punching me. I don't know what's happening.
You said the girls, they broke you, and so you had to break someone else to reclaim your manhood.
Yeah, so I might have told this story with you. We talked about bullying, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago. You and I did. I might have told the story. So, but whatever, who remembers from 3 years ago? So the main girl that bullied me in 7th and 8th grade, she ended up working at like my primary care doctor's office, like as an intern. So like, it was very funny for me to walk in. I was in college. I was a college athlete. I walked in. I was in the best shape of my life.
Yeah.
And like, she's the intern. She was doing, getting like my height and weight and like measurements, I guess. So like, for whatever reason, I had to take my shirt off, and I took my shirt off in front of her, like, I looked pretty good. So it's like, yeah. I kind of did get I didn't bully her back. I didn't say like, look at me now, but I kind of stood there like, I win. It's fine, Yeah. So that was a good moment for me. If only I would have stopped there.
In my darkest of days, Facebook stalking does provide a lot of consolation. If you really want to feel good about yourself, you can look up some of your bullies on social media and see that the hand that they dealt was one that they might have experienced the fruits of their labors. So, yeah.
The person that I bully the most, though, is me, because I also Facebook stalk, but it's like me. I posted a picture today of me from 15 years ago. I looked incredible. That's the worst. I'm my worst own bully, and I think that's part of the problem. You're like, hurt people. I can't blame the sixth grade girls anymore, but I can blame myself. There's no one meaner to me than me. So then people are like, why are you being so mean to me? I'm like, there's this guy bullying me constantly.
You look so much taller. And I'm like, wait, he's the same height. I don't get it. So,
I don't get why he hates me so much. He's just like me.
He's just the same me. Yeah,
exactly. So anyway, that was just some introspective on, there is this like big desire in me to stand up for myself whenever I'm wronged. But I think every now and then I've gotten a little carried away, and to the point of like trying to be funny. And it's like, I get on a roll, and the first, let's say a roll is like 5 or 6 jokes. The first 4 or 5, everybody was cool with. And then if I'm in a group of 10 people, 5 people stop laughing after the 6th, and 7 people are done laughing by the 7th. And
go to 10, you can get it back. You can win it back, Taylor.
Exactly. So,
There's a fine line between standing up for yourself against a bully or even bullying others in return. Great conversation today with Forte Catholic. You want to hear more? Just check it out at Podcast Central. Go to EWTN.com/podcast and make sure you subscribe wherever you like to stream. Then that way you get notification. Easy to do. Don't forget as well, we've got EWTN Extra, which is a part of our app. When you download and stream, gives you a chance to get more conversations that help to deepen your walk with God. Of course, I'll be back next week. We'll do it all again. I'm Ace McKay. Thanks for joining me, and remember to let God define who you are, and I'll see you again with Catholics Coast to Coast.